Dark rain covered Fort Breaker Military Base in Montana. A cold wind whistled between the hangars, throwing dust and wet leaves into the air. Dozens of soldiers stood on the parade ground, exhausted after nighttime exercises. The engines of armored vehicles were still hot after returning from the training field, while thunder rolled slowly across the sky. Sergeant Lucas Reynolds threw his wet gloves onto the hood of a Jeep and let out a heavy sigh. Those were the worst exercises of the entire year. Someone nearby laughed nervously. "You're just mad because Captain Parker beat you at shooting again." Lucas was about to answer when suddenly the base floodlights flickered. Once, twice, then they went completely dark. The massive base instantly sank into total blackness. What the hell? Before he could finish, a strange light appeared in the sky. It hovered directly above the forest beyond the perimeter fence. No sound, no movement, just a perfectly motionless white circle. The soldiers froze. Even the wind seemed to die. "Is that a drone?" a young private asked quietly. "Drones don't hover like that," Captain Jason Parker muttered. The light suddenly jerked sideways, so fast their eyes could barely follow it. Several soldiers instinctively ducked. Then the sound began, a low hum, deep, like some enormous engine running underground. Lucas felt a heavy vibration pass through his chest. The radio on his belt suddenly crackled. "Command, come in!" Only static answered. Then the radio died completely. One by one, every radio on the base went silent. Somewhere behind them, a truck engine suddenly shut off. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances. "The generators are dead too!" a mechanic shouted from near the hangars. The light in the sky grew brighter. Now they could see it clearly. A massive dark object hovered above the trees, triangular in shape, completely silent. 3 white lights glowed at its corners, while a dim red light pulsed in the center. "Jesus Christ!" someone whispered. The object slowly began moving toward the base. That was when the real problem started. Phones shut off in soldiers' hands one after another. Watches died. Even electronic rifle optics powered down without warning. Lucas tried turning on his flashlight. Nothing. The darkness grew thicker. Only the strange object continued illuminating the ground with its cold white glow. Captain Parker pulled out his pistol. "Everyone, take positions!" But even his voice no longer sounded confident. Soldiers scattered toward cover. And at that exact moment, the object stopped directly above the main watchtower. The hum became so powerful that blood began running from some soldiers' noses. Lucas dropped to one knee. The pressure was unbearable, like something invisible was crushing his entire body from above. Breathing became difficult. Someone screamed in the darkness, then another voice cried out, and suddenly, complete silence. The hum vanished. The pressure disappeared too. The object shot upward into the sky. It paused for a single second. Then it vanished. No flash, no trace, as if it had never existed at all. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the power across the base suddenly returned all at once. Generators roared back to life. Radios crackled awake. Soldiers immediately started shouting questions at each other. "Did you see that? What the hell was it? Where did it go?" Lucas slowly pushed himself back to his feet. His hands were shaking. Near the tower, a massive burn mark shaped like a triangle had been left in the concrete. Captain Parker stared at it silently. Then he slowly said, "Nobody talks about this, understood?" In the darkness of the base, sirens could already be heard, and down the road toward headquarters, black SUVs with no license plates were speeding through the rain. The black triangle inside the hangar looked impossibly real. Its matte surface seemed to absorb the light around it. There were no visible seams, no bolts, not even the slightest hint of engines. Just a perfectly smooth structure, hovering a few inches above the concrete floor. Lucas felt his throat go dry. The same low hum he had heard above the base hours earlier filled the air, barely noticeable, but enough to make pressure build inside his temples. People in white protective suits moved around the object, checking instruments and monitors flashing with red numbers. One of the technicians nervously said, "The surface temperature is dropping again. That's impossible." The man in the gray suit slowly stepped out of the vehicle and looked at Lucas. "Now do you understand why we're asking questions?" Lucas didn't answer. He couldn't take his eyes off the triangle. Suddenly, the surface of the object twitched like a ripple passing across black metal. Everyone inside the hangar froze. One of the scientists quickly stepped backward. "It's reacting," he whispered. The man in the suit sharply turned toward Lucas. "What are you feeling?" "What? What are you feeling?" Lucas swallowed hard. "It feels like it's looking at me." Silence filled the room. Several people exchanged nervous glances. A technician standing near a monitor suddenly went pale. "Sir, movement readings are increasing." The object slowly began glowing from within with a dim red light, the exact same color they had seen in the sky above the base. The hum grew louder. The lights inside the hangar flickered violently. One of the computers exploded in a shower of sparks. "Everyone get back!" someone shouted. People quickly retreated away from the triangle, but Lucas remained standing still. He couldn't move. Suddenly, a strange noise appeared inside his head, like a distant whisper, unclear words, a choosy voice. Fragments of memories flashed before his eyes. The Arizona desert. One of the scientists quickly stepped backward. "It's reacting," he whispered. The man in the suit sharply turned toward Lucas. "What are you feeling?" "What? What are you feeling?" Lucas swallowed hard. "It feels like it's looking at me." Silence filled the room. Several people exchanged nervous glances. A technician standing near a monitor suddenly went pale. "Sir, movement readings are increasing." The object slowly began glowing from within with a dim red light, the exact same color they had seen in the sky above the base. The hum grew louder. The lights inside the hangar flickered violently. One of the computers exploded in a shower of sparks. "Everyone get back!" someone shouted. People quickly retreated away from the triangle, but Lucas remained standing still. He couldn't move. Suddenly, a strange noise appeared inside his head, like a distant whisper, unclear words, a choosy voice. Fragments of memories flashed before his eyes. The Arizona desert, a dark sky, the same shape hovering above him, and someone screaming through a radio. Lucas grabbed his head. "Get him away from there!" the man in the suit shouted. Two soldiers rushed forward, but at that exact moment, the triangle suddenly blazed with light. A powerful shockwave slammed through the hangar. People were thrown across the concrete floor. The lights burst one after another. Darkness swallowed the entire room. Only the object continued glowing with its deep red light. Lucas stood directly in front of it. Then the surface of the triangle slowly opened. No sound, no visible mechanism. Inside was an abyss of complete blackness, and from that darkness, something tall and unnaturally thin began stepping out. Lucas couldn't take his eyes off the creature. It stood completely motionless in the middle of the flashing red light, as if the chaos around it meant nothing. Sirens screamed across the entire base. People ran out of the hangar shouting into radios, but most of the equipment had already stopped working. Sparks poured from shattered power panels. The air smelled of burned plastic and ozone. The man in the gray suit struggled to his feet and grabbed Lucas by the arm. "You need to get away from it, now!" But Lucas could barely hear him. The same strange whisper echoed inside his head, only now it had become louder, as if someone was speaking directly inside his mind. Fragments of foreign memories flashed before his eyes again. A dark ocean, massive cities beneath black skies, strange stars, and then war, blinding flashes of light, destruction, screams. Lucas grabbed his head in pain. "What is it doing to him?" one of the technicians shouted. The creature slowly turned toward Lucas. A thin, vertical crack suddenly appeared across the smooth surface of its head. Red light leaked out from inside. The people around them began backing away even farther. Even the armed soldiers were now afraid to shoot. The man in the suit whispered, "Impossible." "What's impossible?" Parker shouted nervously. The man slowly turned toward Lucas. "It recognizes him." Dead silence filled the hangar. Lucas felt his legs growing weak. "What does that mean?" Nobody answered. The creature took another step forward. Strange, dark cracks spread beneath it across the concrete floor, as if the ground itself were beginning to melt. Now Lucas could see it more clearly. Its body constantly shifted and moved, like liquid flowing beneath a black shell. Sometimes faint white lights flickered beneath its surface, as if something alive was trapped inside it. Suddenly, every screen inside the hangar powered on at the same time, without electricity, without commands. Strange symbols appeared across the monitors, an unknown language, geometric shapes, red coordinates. One of the scientists suddenly went pale. It's a map!" The man in the suit rushed toward the monitor. "What kind of map?" A rotating image of Earth slowly appeared on the screen. Then, glowing points began flashing one after another. New York, Chicago, Denver, Seattle, Washington, one by one. Lucas felt ice run through his entire body. "Oh, God." Parker stepped closer to the monitor. "What do those points mean?" Nobody had time to answer. The creature suddenly raised its head. Every light inside the hangar exploded at once. Complete darkness swallowed the room. Then came a horrible metallic scraping sound, like something enormous was clawing at the outer walls of the building. Soldiers panicked and raised their weapons. "It's not alone," someone whispered in the darkness. And at that exact moment, the first screams erupted across the base. The screams outside were growing louder. Gunfire, sirens, and exploding glass echoed across the entire base. Inside the darkness of the hangar, soldiers nervously swept their flashlights around, but the beams trembled in their hands just as much as the men holding them. Lucas stood in the middle of the chaos, hearing heavy impacts somewhere outside, as if something enormous was moving between the hangars of Fort Breaker. The man in the gray suit grabbed his radio. "Command, report the situation." Only static and someone's desperate scream answered him. Then the connection died completely. Captain Parker loaded his rifle and looked back at his men. "Hold your positions. Whatever's out there, we do not let it inside." One of the younger soldiers whispered with a shaking voice, "Sir, what if it's already here?" At that exact second, something slammed into the hangar doors with terrifying force. The metal bent inward. Another impact followed, then another. Bolts began ripping out of the walls. People panicked and stumbled backward. Lucas suddenly turned toward the triangular object. The creature was no longer moving. It stood perfectly still before the open darkness inside the ship. Then the whisper inside Lucas's head suddenly became clear. For the first time, he understood actual words. "Open." Lucas flinched. The voice wasn't human. It was cold, ancient, like emptiness itself was speaking to him. "What are you?" he whispered. The creature slowly raised its arm and pointed toward the hangar doors. At that exact moment, the final impact came. The massive metal gates were ripped outward. Freezing night air burst inside together with dust and rain. And then they saw them. Dozens of identical creatures stood beyond the destroyed entrance. Tall, black, motionless, their white lights glowed in the darkness like the eyes of predators. The soldiers opened fire instantly. The hangar exploded with the roar of rifles, but the bullets simply vanished inside the creatures' black bodies, as if they were firing into shadows. One of the creatures suddenly jerked its arm. A soldier standing near the wall was literally torn apart in midair. Blood sprayed across the concrete. People screamed and retreated deeper into the hangar. Parker grabbed Lucas by the shoulder. "We can't stop this! What does it want from you?" Lucas breathed heavily. The whisper inside his head grew louder, and suddenly he understood. Not words, not language, intention. They hadn't come for the base. They hadn't come for the people. They had come for him. One final memory exploded inside his mind. Arizona, 2021, a desert night, a triangular object hanging in the sky, and a younger Lucas touching a strange black stone found after something crashed from above. He had never told anyone about it. But now the memory had fully returned. Something had changed inside him that night, and they had been searching for him ever since. The man in the gray suit suddenly went pale. Oh my God, the carrier! Lucas slowly looked back at the creature standing before him. It extended its arm once more. Open! An unbearable pain exploded inside Lucas's head. He dropped to his knees and screamed. At that exact moment, something inside his chest began glowing red beneath his skin. Every creature around them froze instantly. The triangular ship began humming louder and louder. The lights inside the hangar burst into blinding white brightness. Then Lucas did the only thing that came to mind. He ran straight into the open darkness inside the ship. "Lucas!" Parker screamed, but it was too late. The darkness inside the triangle swallowed him instantly. At that same moment, every creature sharply turned its head toward the ship. As if they had suddenly lost their target, the air itself began trembling. A deafening explosion of light erupted through the hangar. Soldiers fell to the floor, covering their eyes. And when the light vanished, the hangar was empty. The ship was gone. The creatures were gone too. Only dead silence, smoke, and burned marks across the concrete remained behind. Rain slowly tapped against the shattered gates of the base. Captain Parker stared silently into the darkness where the triangle had stood only seconds earlier. "He saved us," one of the soldiers whispered quietly. But the man in the gray suit only stared grimly up at the sky, because high above the clouds, 3 white lights suddenly appeared once again, and this time there was more than one.